My name is Doug Horn. I am an entrepreneur founder live here in Provo, and I have the opportunity to introduce our speaker today. Brother Mark Jones is founder of Texas Wasatch Group and serves as chairman and CEO. And under his leadership, TWG Insurance has become one of the largest and fastest growing personal lines agencies in the United States. He has a great story to tell about that. I got to hear his earlier lecture, and it's a wonderful story. Prior to joining the company, Mr. Jones was a director and senior partner of Bain & Company, the global management consulting firm. Earlier in his career, he spent several years with Ernst & Young in their audit and mergers and acquisitions practice groups. Mr. Jones also serves as chairman and CEO of Goosehead Capital, a private investment firm, and sits on the board of V-Spring Capital, a Salt Lake City-based venture capital firm. He holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree, emphasis on finance, accounting, and economics from the University of Alberta, and an MBA from Harvard Business School. He loves sports and spending time with his family. He does have 6 children, and his wife is with him somewhere. I don't know if she's with this group here today or not. Robin, are you here somewhere?
She's downstairs interviewing.
Okay, she's downstairs interviewing, so I don't get to introduce her, but they have 6 children, ages 27 down to 16, 5 girls, 1 boy, as I understand it, and we appreciate very much having the Jones come and speak to us today, and they flew in from Texas to do this, and we're very appreciative of this, and we'd like to invite Brother Jones up here and give him this as our token of appreciation for being here today. And
thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Welcome, Brother Jones.
Thanks, Doug. Okay. I'm glad to be here. I always like to come to BYU. It was interesting. We recruit at a lot of schools and speak at a lot of schools, and it was interesting to me to, be in a class where they open with prayer, because this is the only school where they do that. And in both opening prayers, students, expressed real profound gratitude for the school and being able to be here. And I think that is a wonderful quality to be appreciative. It reminds me of when I was in business school. Harvard is very good on some dimensions, and it is very bad on some dimensions. And one of the things that they did for us during our entire first year is every day they drilled into our heads, you select people were born to rule the world, and everyone else is just here to serve you and help you do that. And it's not good. At the end of my first year, we had a professor named Warren Law, who was a Harvard Business School professor for 40 years. And HBS classes are all case. There's no lecture ever. And during the last class, Professor Law lectured. And he started off by saying, all of you people are lucky to be here. He said, you're truly lucky to be here. The admissions office, well, they get a lot of applications, and there's 800 kids in each class. It's always a toss-up. He said there's always about double the students that are qualified. There's lots that aren't competitive that don't get in, but he said there's always double that are truly qualified, and you're lucky that you were chosen. You're no better than the other 800 that just didn't quite make it. So it's nice to be appreciative where you went to school, and BYU is a great school. I'm really glad to be here. I'm going to talk today a little bit about some lessons that we've learned with our business that hopefully will be helpful to some of you that are considering entrepreneurial ventures. Doug already mentioned my background, so I won't spend any time on it. But when I thought of insurance, this is kind of the picture that I had in my mind. When I was at Bain, I worked with a number of insurance companies, but I always worked at the senior executive level or with the CEO.
Do you know Mitt Romney then?
Yes, Mitt was one of my partners, yeah. but never in distribution. So I kind of had this impression that this is what sort of selling insurance was like, and in some dimensions it's right, in others it was wrong, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that as we get into this. Just to give you some background on how I sort of was approaching this and thinking about this, my background had always been to figure out how to get to checkmate. So working with clients to help them figure out how to put themselves in a situation, thank you, where their competitors could not respond. Situation of industry dominance. And this is just a little bit of data from the PIMS database. PIMS database is something that the Harvard Business School keeps. It's all the financial information from all public companies in the United States from the end of the Second World War to now. And if you look at this calibrates to some degree the benefit of being the market leader. The left-hand panel sort of shows the average return on investment for investments made in companies that have under 10% market share and over 40% market share. And there's a big gap between 9 and 29%. And it's similar, in some respects, a little bit more stark when you look at relative market share. So size of the leader relative to the followers in the industry. And the reason that it's so important is because when you have industry leadership, you can afford to do things that your competitors can't. An example is Texas Instruments went through a restructuring about, now it was probably 12 or 14 years ago, where they went through their portfolio and they got rid of a bunch of businesses. One of the businesses they kept was a chip business. And their relative market share in that business allowed them to invest more in research and development annually than the sales of their next largest competitor. So if you're competing against TI in that business, you have no chance. And that's sort of an extreme example, but that was kind of the framework that I was coming at this with. Now, when we went into the business, this is a picture of Lee Lewis, who's one of the guys that we've hired from BYU. He's actually downstairs interviewing candidates right now. This is just what Lee is like. If you see him, Lee is not a good athlete, and he is happy to admit that. You see him going off the wake on his water skis. There's 100% probability that Lee's going to bite it. But look at the expression on his face. And in many respects, this was a little bit like this for us going into this business. Now, there's a couple of things that made this really, really attractive. Because for me, there was a very high opportunity cost to leave Bain. I'd invested 14 years. I had had a good run. I had really enjoyed it. I was a very senior partner. And so it took a lot for me to conclude there's a different option that I should be pursuing. But one of the things that sort of really impacted my thinking was just the size of the market. And this gives you some sense of the relative size of different markets in the United States. Consumer electronics is about a $50 billion a year business. That's all the TVs, all the stereos, all the iPods, all the CDs, everything in the United States that's consumer electronics. You add that all up and you come to about about $50 billion a year. If you look at publishing, it's a little better than double that, about $115 billion. So you think of every magazine that you see, every online subscription, anything that is published material, add that all up, it's about $115 billion a year. The automotive aftermarket's about $200 billion a year. So this is all the tires, all the windshield wiper blades, all the replacement seat belts, everything that you would buy for a car after it's manufactured. Add all that up in the United States, it's about $200 billion a year. Now, you triple that, and you get to the home building business. Now, it's going to be a little smaller this year, but historically, it's been about a $650 billion business. It's really interesting to sort of look at the context of businesses that you sort of traditionally think of as a large business, consumer electronics, and the home building business is about 13 times as big as that. And then the biggest of all is insurance. There's about $1.2 trillion a year of insurance premiums sold in the United States. Think about that for just a minute. $1.2 trillion. It's an incomprehensible number. If any of you have been following the sort of federal bailout package that's being negotiated through Congress right now, I mean, that's just got people in an upheaval, and that's $700 billion. So it's about 60% of the size of the insurance market. It is just monstrous. So that was one thing that was very attractive for me. I didn't want to go into a business that didn't have the potential to become large. So the first thing that needed to happen was it needed to be big, and insurance is big. The next thing is fragmentation in the market. Now this was really counterintuitive to the way that I'd thought about business for a long, long time. I was always working with clients trying to figure out how to get to checkmate. If you look at the fragmentation of the U.S., this is property and casualty insurance, you can see that the top 10 insurance companies in the United States control less than 50% of the market. As a comparative reference point, if you go all the way over to the right-hand side, in France, the top 5 competitors control over 70% of the market. This is what you typically see in a mature industry. You have a handful of competitors that have consolidated the market, and it's relatively stable. You think about businesses that you could sort of enter that the game is done. Today, PC manufacturing would be one. It's too late to enter the PC manufacturing business. There are really sort of 3 major companies. There's IBM, there's HP, and there's Dell. And any one or any combination of those, if someone started a PC manufacturing company, any one of those guys could step on your throat, and there's nothing that you could do about it. In this business, these companies are actually much bigger, but they have so little share of the market that there's just a lot of fluidity. You can create a very successful business and come up behind these guys, and there's nothing they can do about it because they don't control enough of the market. Again, very counterintuitive to the way that I had thought about business for a long, long time. So let me just kind of walk through how we thought about the process. I believe you guys use this same construct, and hopefully there'll be some lessons in here that'll be relevant for you. In the concept and planning stage, there's just a lot of basic business principles, Business 101, that you shouldn't ignore. The first thing is to have a market plan. And it is good to have a need that you're responding to in the market, as opposed to saying, I want to start a business and I'm going to look for an idea. If you say, I want to start a business and look for an idea, probability is quite high that you'll fail. If you start with a need, on the other hand, and say, I'm going to be prepared whenever this need comes up, maybe it comes up the year after I graduate from college, maybe it comes up, as it did with me when I was, in my early 40s. You don't know. But if you wait for an opportunity, a real need to present itself, chances are much higher that you'll be successful. You got to think about an operational plan. How am I actually going to deliver the good or service? Financially, how am I going to be able to pay for it, put together the funds necessary, and where do I get the people? A lot of companies tell you that their most important asset is their people, and that's true. You can't do anything with a business if you don't have people that can execute. There are pretty tight limits on what you can do yourself if you want to grow to any kind of scale. So you've got to have good people that can back you up. It's really important at the beginning to identify what real competitive advantage you actually will have. Because if you don't have something that's competitive advantage, chances are you probably won't be successful. So you want to find something that you can do better or as good as the best people in the business. It's important to make economically rational decisions, and I'll just share one story with you of a guy that used to work with us at Bain. He had decided that he wanted to start a business, and one of the things that he thought about was movie theaters, and thinking that it was the movie projectors were very old-fashioned technology. They couldn't have much of a life left, and so what he was going to do is start a business where he got Hollywood producers to put movies on DVDs, like we'd show at home, and have them distributed first to the movie theaters and then to other outlets. And he, sort of developed all these financial forecasts. He came around asking for people to invest. I did not invest because I didn't see a sort of a clear path to being successful. He left Bain. He started this business, and within about 3 months went bankrupt. He didn't talk to any customers first. If he had, he would have found out that no one was interested in CDs. There's something, and I don't know what it is, but there's something unique about the actual screen, the film roll at the movie theater, that you get higher quality pictures than you can on a sort of digital medium. I don't know what it is, but if he had sort of thought about that in advance, he would probably be in business today. But he wasn't being economically rational. He didn't know how he was going to make money and know how to define success. Let me just spend one additional minute on this notion of making economically rational decisions. One of the things that I have done to make a point more than anything else is I refused to get a logo. If you look at this, I mean, we use this. It's just Arial black bolded. That's all it is. And early on, a lot of our employees said, "Well, let's spend some time, kind of looking for a logo and trying to come up with something." And my question to them is, how is that going to make money? How is that going to make us money? And I have a very good friend him and I were very close. We went to business school together. He's a highly educated guy, very articulate, very impressive guy. And he called me, this was several years ago, and said, "I'm starting a business." And I said, "Well, what are you going to do?" He said, "Well, I'm not really sure, but you know what we're doing right now? We're opening bank accounts, we're getting business cards, and we're getting a logo." And he had it backwards. And you can imagine what happened. He didn't make a dime. So focusing on the things that will act. Business is about making money. You don't want to do it in an unethical or a mean-spirited way. But at the end of the day, a business is an economic organization. And if you haven't figured out how you're going to make money, you've got a problem. Okay, when we started, one of the things we wanted to do is start with an end in mind. And so we kind of came up with, what is our end game vision? Ultimately, what would we like to do? And what we decided is we'd like to eventually become the largest, most profitable, most valuable personal lines agency or insurance broker in the country, with the best team, the best clients, and unrivaled service. We aspire to be one of the most admired financial services companies in the world. And we wanted to be the employer of choice for the world's best and brightest by providing good learning opportunities, attractive economics, especially over time. And right now we're targeting an IPO. So there's some exciting things about that. And a work environment where people enjoyed coming to work. So we said before we started, this is what we want it to look like. Now, in the concept and planning stage, the concept really arose by accident. People ask me all the time, insurance carriers do, how did you get in the business? And my response, it literally was an accident. We had some investment properties that my wife was managing, and one of the things that she had to do was insure these properties. And she couldn't find an insurance agent that she thought was smart and that cared about our assets. And she tried and tried and tried, and finally she just gave up and said, forget it, I'm going to start my own. And she told me this, and I'm thinking, well, that's fine and great. I mean, I was very, very busy at Bain, had a heavy client load, I was global head of recruiting, and I didn't have any time to sort of think about or invest in this. I just assumed it would be a hobby business for Robin. And so, you know, we didn't have any personal expertise, nothing. It was very absolutely clearly a response to a need. As we looked at it, though, we found for all practical purposes the market truly is infinite. It is so big that size is irrelevant. It's highly fragmented, which gives a startup a lot more degrees of freedom. And it's a mature business, so you know what's going to happen in the industry. It's not one of these things where change is happening. It's not a technology company. Change isn't happening so fast that you can't predict what it's going to look like in 5 years. We know what it's going to look like in 5 years. We knew that our competitive advantage lied really solely in the kind of people that we could hire. And in my role at Bain as head of worldwide recruiting, I had developed significant expertise in identifying and hiring really, really good talent, and we literally just applied that to our business. And the kind of people that we've hired are extraordinary, and the results will show that. I'll show you that in a minute. Our initial marketing plan was a complete pipe dream, and it was wrong on every single dimension. We hired a woman that had been a farmer's agent for about 28 years, and she came up with a lot of forecasts and details about what she could do, and we just built that into a business plan. And not being as thoughtful as I should, I didn't go and check her references. I had every reason to believe she was trustworthy, and so didn't take that extra step, and I should have done that. But you'll see our marketing plan was way, way off. We didn't have an operational plan, but I knew that I'd had enough experience that we could make it up as we went along pretty easily. And our funding approach really created maximum flexibility, and we really needed that. And I'm going to show you some data in a minute that says why. But the issue of funding is, in many cases, kind of a life or death situation for a lot of companies. And again, I'll talk about that more in a minute. In the startup phase, there's some things that you want to make sure that you're doing once you've got your business started and you're sort of growing. One is you want to align incentives of your personnel as tightly as you can with the strategy of the company. You want people to make the same decisions and take the same actions as you would take if you were there or if you were standing over their shoulder. You want them to do the same thing if you're halfway across the country, because it's in their best interests economically. And I've seen this time and time and time again with clients at Bain, where we were working with Continental Airlines. It was before all of you were probably old enough to pay any attention to business, but Continental was headed for a third and final bankruptcy. If they went bankrupt again, they were going to go Chapter 7, which is, they just break the whole thing up. They weren't going Chapter 11. So we were working down there, and there was a number of us, and we have very dire projections as to what was going to happen if people didn't change, and people didn't change until we changed the incentive structure. Once we changed that, Continental got turned. It was a lot of work, but the aligning incentives was really the key between a good idea and something actually happening. And we've seen that in spades in our business. Business is about being willing to act and not get sort of tied up in analysis paralysis. It's important to hope for the best, but plan for the worst, because the worst is going to happen at some point. You probably can't project when. You probably don't know what's going to go wrong. It could be unknowable. So just plan for maximum flexibility. you can manage costs a lot better than you can manage revenue. And even in our business is very much a revenue-driven business. The economics are very, very leveraged with revenue, but nonetheless, we do focus on cost, because cost you have a lot more control over. You can manage costs. You know how much you're going to spend on your office, on your people, kind of on your inputs, whatever it is. It's just a lot easier to control that. So control what you can, control your costs. Here's what the actual revenue was. First month it was $400. The next month it was $2,900. The following month it was $3,600. It's a lot different than $27,000. So what happened is we ended up investing about 18 times what we originally thought we were going to invest in the business. And this is one of those things, one of the sort of the really key takeaways that I want you to note down. If you ignore everything else that I say today, I want you to get one thing, and that is making sure that you have the right kind of financing so that you have flexibility to accommodate bad decisions that you will accidentally make. In our case, I'm on the board at VSpring, and I know that if our business had been funded by VSpring, they would have pulled the plug long before we got to 18 times our initial estimate. The only reason we were able to do this is because we funded it ourselves. We didn't go to any outside capital, and that gave us maximum flexibility. But that is so critically important. If you ignore everything else that I say, everything else today, remember that the source, the type of capital that you get is a life or death decision. So startup lessons that we learned painfully that hopefully many of you will not have to learn the same way. Trust but verify. when we started, we had every reason to believe this woman. She had lots of experience, very detailed forecasts. We had every reason to believe her. And I should have pressure tested her numbers with her former employer, and I didn't do that. So trust but verify. Costs are much easier to control than revenues. Variabilize those. Get your compensation system right as soon as possible, because that will have a big impact on getting people to behave and take actions the way that you want them to. If you're an entrepreneur, there's no room for pride. You cannot, if you want to be successful, you cannot be unwilling to sort of acknowledge that you're wrong and make changes, because you are going to be wrong. There's a lot more unknowables. And then make sure you're adequately capitalized with the right kind of capital. Adequately capitalized with the right kind of capital. Not all capital is the same. I'll get to questions at the end. So growth. We're in the growth phase right now. And one of the things that I think is important if you're a growth company is you shouldn't have to make excuses. If you find yourself saying to your customers, oh, sorry you had a bad service experience, we're just growing real fast. That's not very good. Your business isn't going to continue to grow at the rate that it has if you have to start apologizing and making excuses. So my philosophy on that is run your business so you don't have to make excuses. Manage your business based on a P&L as opposed to net present value. Is everyone in the room taken at least one finance class? Anyone not? Okay. The concept of net present value is just basically looking at the lifetime cash flows of something. You discount those back, but really it's kind of looking at the lifetime payback of an investment that you make. And I'll show you an example of some companies in our industry that made the mistake of focusing on net present value as opposed to P&L. Be flexible, constantly be rebalancing your resources, keep your eyes on the cash, having the right financial controls. One example that has hit very close to home, and my initial background was accounting, so I was kind of steeped in these internal controls, but I have a good friend who went into the wood millwork business with two partners. They're all LDS, all good people, but they were three equal partners, and as such, they all had bank signing authority. They could all sign checks. Unfortunately, they could also all make accounting entries in their books. So whenever you can write a check and also record that check, you have an absence of internal controls, and that's exactly what happened to them. They just weren't thinking about it. It's not that he's not a smart guy. He is. He just didn't think about it. And his partner embezzled a whole bunch of money, a ton of money. And it all could have been avoided. It's the saying that locks keep honest people honest is really right. Maintain momentum and keep focused on the vision. It's hard to build a business and grow quickly over time. It really is hard. People will sort of look on the outside and you'll see Google or sort of any number of companies that are doing well and think, man, that's great, that looks really good. But one thing that it may not occur initially is how hard those people are working all the time. They're working real hard, and it sometimes can get tiring just grinding it out every day. But if you're keeping focused on the vision as to what you ultimately want to accomplish, it's a lot easier to sort of not get lost in the forest for the trees. For us, a couple things that we've done that I think are important to us is strengthen management as we've grown. I just hired one of my former partners at Bain & Company to join as our COO. That's working out great so far. And for us, having a way to sort of monetize what you're doing is important. For us, we're targeting an IPO. So let me just show you a little bit of data. These first two bar, well, this whole graph represents marketing cost per policy or customer acquisition cost. The first two companies are companies we looked at acquiring. They are both the insurance agency divisions of large commercial banks. Very sophisticated, very successful banks, none of which have been in the news lately. And the problem is, you can see, I mean, we spend about $105 to acquire a client. That's about how much we spend on advertising. These guys we're spending $430 to $580 a policy. Very, very expensive. We looked at that and couldn't justify it. We were in a due diligence meeting, and I was sitting across from the guys at one of the companies, and if you actually look at their renewal patterns, they never will break even. They'll never get the money back that they just spent on advertising. And if you run your business based on a net present value model, it's easy to sort of say, well, over time we're going to collect $600 per client, so if we're spending $430 on acquisition, we're still up $170. Well, that only works if you're not capital constrained. And these guys weren't capital constrained. The banks kept pumping money into them until it got to a point where they said, hold on a second, what are we doing? One company, one of our competitors, acquired both of these. We actually made bids on both of them, but we weren't willing to pay what our competitor was. One of our competitors bought both of these guys, and they went bankrupt in January. So if you manage based on your P&L, you can make sure that the cash cycle is working for you. I'm going to skip that in the interest of time. We've been sort of very focused on delivery. We've seen excellent client growth, excellent revenue growth that continues. We've focused very hard on making sure we have the right people working the right way, and our people have been roughly 5 times as productive as the rest of the industry. We have a philosophy of work hard, play hard. We have very, very competitive people. They're all young. The average age, I think, in the company is probably 24. There are, well, my wife Robin, who's the vice chairman, works part-time. Our COO that I've just hired and I are the only people over 40, and I don't know if we have anyone that's over 30. Everyone else is in their 20s. So it's a very young, very energetic, very, very competitive group. So we do a lot of things. One of the things we do is paintball, which is fun. This is one group. We will sometimes go out on the lake. You'll notice this is one of my daughters who used to work for us. She's got a whole hand of hair of this guy, and look at the expression on her face. She doesn't seem to feel bad about it. We'll take trips sometimes. This is one in front of the New York Stock Exchange. We went up to New York for some things. And with maturity, we're not there. We don't know yet what it's going to bring. It'll be an interesting story. So what's the moral of the story for me? For me, having worked for a long time with a lot of companies and doing a lot of work in turnarounds and improving corporate performance, for me, it's been a lot more rewarding to create than it is to fix something. It's more challenging. It's more complex. There's a lot more unknowables, and I've really enjoyed it. It's okay to be different. You don't have to work for Goldman Sachs to have a great career. You can do something actually really different, and Goldman Sachs is a bad example right now, but Bain & Company. And one of the things that is a wonderful thing about a free market is there are some industries with very weak competitors, and we're in one. And weak competitors breed great opportunities. Never believe you can't ride a bike on the top of a fence. There's a story about a little boy who used to come home from school every day and ride his bike around the top of their fence. And he came home, did it every day. And one day the next door neighbor drove up, and he was riding his bike on the top of the fence. And the next door neighbor said, "What on earth are you doing?" He said, "I'm riding my bike on the top of the fence." And the neighbor said, "You can't do that. You're going to fall and get hurt." And he said, "Oh, okay." And that was the last time he rode his bike on the top of the fence. Don't believe naysayers. Don't believe naysayers. Great people can overcome a multitude of mistakes. We've made a lot of mistakes. We've done a lot of things right. But because of the quality of people that we've hired, we've been able to work our way pretty quickly out of mistakes. And a disciplined and successful economic model can provide funding to do some pretty exciting things. But financial flexibility is pretty important. You want to make sure that you control your destiny, so make sure you have enough funding to survive. And that is it. I'll take questions for a few minutes and